Have you ever seen one of these in person? The Airbus A380. It's an absolute icon of aviation ambition. A double-decker giant, the largest passenger plane ever built, designed to fly over 500 people across entire continents in some serious comfort. You know, the A380 was so much more than a plane. It was this huge statement about what the future of travel was supposed to look like.
But that future, it never quite arrived. Instead of dominating the skies for decades, many of these magnificent machines found themselves right here, being literally torn apart for scrap. And get this, some of them were barely a decade old. So, what on earth happened?
Okay, let's get into it. This is the story of a dream that flew head-on into a brutally different reality.
To really understand the A380, you have to rewind the clock back to the 1990s. Air travel was just booming. Millions of new passengers were taking to the skies, and the world's biggest airports were getting seriously crowded. And Airbus thought they had the perfect solution.
And this brings us to the first crucial point. Airbus bet its entire future on a concept called hub-to-hub travel. Now, the logic, it seemed pretty compelling. The idea was, instead of adding more and more flights between already congested mega hubs like London, Dubai, and Shanghai, why not just use a bigger plane? The A380 was designed to be the ultimate people mover for a world they believed would be defined by these massive, centralized airports.
But here's the thing. From the very beginning, this was a massive gamble. The entire aviation industry was pretty much split right down the middle, with two completely different visions of whether this giant plane would ever pay off.
On one side, you had the optimists, the bulls. They saw a perfect storm brewing. A new middle class was rising in Asia, flocking to mega cities, and they all wanted to fly to other major hubs in Europe and the US. For them, the A380 wasn't just a good idea, it was an inevitability.
But then you had the skeptics, the bears, and they saw a completely different trend. They argued that new technology was letting smaller, more efficient planes fly directly between smaller cities, bypassing the mega hubs altogether. In their view, the future wasn't about concentration, it was about fragmentation.
So, and this is the really crucial part, this was not just some academic debate. The success or failure of the A380 represented a swing of nearly 10 billion euros in Airbus's total value. The stakes, well, they could not have been higher.
So, with billions on the line, Airbus had to move from the financial world to the incredible physical challenge of actually building this behemoth. This wasn't just a big plane, it was a logistical masterpiece. The parts of the A380 were so enormous that you couldn't fly them to the final assembly line. So Airbus created a custom 150-mile-long land and water convoy route through France. They called it the Itinéraire à Grand Gabarit.
And this just brilliantly illustrates the sheer scale of the project. I mean, these convoys were a spectacle. To get these massive 23-foot-wide fuselage sections through ancient villages, they had to trim trees, temporarily remove road signs, and navigate streets with just inches to spare. And they did it all in the dead of night to minimize disruption. Just incredible.
The A380 was, without a doubt, an engineering triumph. But as it finally took to the skies, it was about to fly head-on into a completely different future than the one it was designed for. The world had changed. Now, on paper, when you compared it to its direct rival, the old Boeing 747, the A380 was a winner. It was about 2 to 3% more fuel efficient per seat. It was a marginal victory, sure, but it was still a victory. But right here, this is where we get to the central, fatal miscalculation. You see, the A380's real competition wasn't another 4-engine jumbo jet. It was this new generation of ultra-efficient twin-engine planes, like the Boeing 787 and even Airbus's own A350. These planes were a staggering 25 to 30% cheaper to fly per passenger. The game had completely changed.
And this leads us to the next big problem, the sheer impracticality of operating the plane day to day. Only a select few airports in the world were physically large enough to handle it. Getting hundreds of people on and off was a constant headache. And financially, the plane was a trap. It only made sense if you could consistently fill over 85% of its seats, and that is a huge risk for any airline on any given route. So, as most airlines realized, the A380 just didn't fit their new reality of flying point to point, the fleet began to face a pretty grim fate. But within that story, there were a few surprising and honestly remarkable exceptions. Take the story of the A380 operated by the airline Hi-Fly. It was the first one on the second-hand market, and instead of flying luxury routes, it became this amazing humanitarian workhorse. It flew into Wuhan at the start of the pandemic, completed a round-the-world mission to deliver aid, and it even carried the message, "Save the coral reefs," on its side to airports all over the globe. And yet, for every story like that, there's a much harsher reality. As of late 2025, at least 30 of the 251 A380s ever built have already been permanently scrapped. It's just an unceremonious end for such a young and advanced fleet of aircraft. Now, the one airline that truly made the A380's hub-to-hub dream a reality was Emirates. They bought nearly half of all A380s ever made and built their entire global strategy around connecting the world through their massive Dubai hub. For them and a few others, the Superjumbo was a resounding success.
So, when we look back at all this, what should we take away from the story of the magnificent and maybe misunderstood Airbus A380?
Ultimately, we've seen the core issues: a big bet on a centralized world that never fully came to be, and the rise of hyper-efficient new planes that just changed the rules of the game. And it all leaves us with this one fascinating question. Was the A380 a fundamentally flawed concept, just a misreading of the market from the very start? Or was it a brilliant machine, a beautiful dream of what aviation's future could be, that was simply made obsolete by a world that changed way faster than anyone could have predicted?